Watch right now on the Front News Project exclusive footage of real combat. The Ukrainian armed forces repelled an enemy assault near Kostiantynivka. Russian armored vehicles destroyed. Russia fears Web 2. Is Crimea about to be shaken? Hell, in Kyiv, the genocide of Ukrainians continues. 28 dead. Fiery, intense and blazing footage from the front lines watch right now. It is the fourth year of the full-scale war that Putin's Russia started on Ukrainian soil. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to heroically defend not only their homeland, but the entire civilized world from the aggression of Kremlin war criminals. Greetings! This is Front News. I'm Volodymyr Tymoshenko. Over the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. And we'll start right away with the most terrifying, a hellish night for Kyiv. As a result of enemy strikes on June 17th, 28 people were killed and more than 140 were injured. Among the dead are a 91-year-old woman and a 22-year-old man. The search and rescue operation in the Solomianskaya district of the capital, where an entire section of a residential building was destroyed by an enemy attack, has been completed. TSN correspondent Yulia Kirienko visited the site of this tragedy. Her chilling report follows.
The clearing of the rubble from the destroyed entrance of the 9-story building on Otradne continues. They managed to clear everything down to the basement where all the floors collapsed. 21 people died here. Rescuers recovered 11 bodies yesterday and another 10 this morning. They were no longer searching for survivors here. Among the dead, there are some who have not been identified. Today, the bodies of 8 more victims were recovered. The last 2 were women from the same family. Now they are clearing the basement, where all the floors of one entrance collapsed.
I live in this building, and there was a co-worker in that entrance. She lived on the 2nd floor. I don't know if she's alive or not. My grandson lived there, and my son-in-law too. Well, right now I'm trying to find out what's going on there.
In the courtyard of the high-rise, where an entire entrance collapsed because of a Russian missile, 2 more 5-story buildings were also damaged. They are located just a few meters away from the high-rise. You can see that the clearing of the rubble is still ongoing. People are boarding up broken windows with chipboard. Absolutely every apartment here has been affected. There are injured people. Nevertheless, they now have access to their apartments, are trying to clear out construction debris, and utility workers are helping them with this. Some local residents spent the last night in their destroyed homes. There isn't a single intact apartment in this building. Is that correct?
I don't want to give you false information, but it seems to me that there are some intact apartments. But unfortunately, the windows are shattered.
Dozens of apartments in 3 buildings have been affected. The State Emergency Service has already deployed cranes and gone up to the upper floors of the neighboring entrance, which survived, in order to clear construction debris and dismantle balconies damaged by the blast wave. And now we can see people who have gained access to their apartments this morning, collecting whatever belongings have survived.
I live here, but...
I used to live here, but...
Are you helping someone?
Yes, a friend. My apartment was also destroyed. Nothing good, it's a complete disaster.
It's brutal. Full.
Next to the site of the Russian attack, where 3 buildings were damaged, a large headquarters is operating to help local residents. Here you can have a hot coffee, eat something warm, because there is still no gas supply in the houses. People can't cook food. Electricity was only restored the day before. There is only water. You can also get psychological and medical assistance here. Medical staff are on duty here, and people are still coming to them even a day after the attack. They still need psychological and medical help. The police and investigators are working nearby, taking statements about the destruction. In the same way, people can apply for restoration and a one-time payment for the premises that were damaged. One important detail. In the building on Solomenka, where the entrance collapsed and the whole building was damaged, there is an official shelter in the first entrance, with even a sign indicating that you can hide here from a Russian attack. And on that night, almost 100 people were there, according to eyewitnesses. Because people from neighboring buildings also came here. This shelter held up
Ears. Both ears got blocked. Terrifying ears blocked. The children were screaming, crying. About 100 people were in the shelter. The lights went out. Children cried. People screamed. It was a nightmare. It was such a horror.
fresh flowers are already being brought to the site of the Russian attack where people died. Here is one of the bouquets on the ground next to the building where a Russian missile destroyed an entire entrance. This was one of the largest attacks by the Russian Federation on Ukraine on Kyiv in the past year.
Yes, in fact, about 1,500 people have been hospitalized after this brutal terrorist attack by the enemy. Until recently, 3 of the severely wounded remained in intensive care. The diagnoses among the victims are generally similar. These include shrapnel wounds, cuts from glass, chest and torso contusions, and traumatic brain injuries. The stories of those who survived will be told and shown by TSN correspondent Irina Prokofieva.
Ambulances arrive at the hospital one after another to unload patients and then head out again on new calls.
As you can see, ambulances are still bringing in patients who were injured as a result of this enemy attack.
This is a hospital on the right bank of the capital, where an entire entrance of a residential building collapsed from a direct missile hit. I want to say that I am very glad you came to us. Viktor Ivanov, who lived in that building in Kyiv's Solominka district, doesn't know how to thank fate. He doesn't have a single scratch on him. His wife has minor injuries to her legs. They had moved into the building, where the rubble is now being cleared, just 2 days ago from Bucha, but now they don't know if there's anywhere left to return to.
They're alive. Honestly, I have no idea if there's anything left at all. And as for the fact that the neighboring entrance was gone, I only saw that on the news. Everything was black, there was a glow, everything was burning, and the cars parked nearby were exploding.
On the neighboring bed are residents from the next building. They suffered quite a bit as well. Sergey shielded his wife Valia from the wave of sharp glass that flew into the apartment after the strike. The table flipped over.
Well, I think I rolled over and we immediately ran downstairs over that glass to where our shelter is. There, a guy with medical training helped. Ashe also provided psychological support, by the way. I'm very grateful to that guy. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name because I was in a state of severe stress. Max? Yes, Maxim, thank you so much. And really, thanks to everyone who helped.
There are at least 27 similar stories in this hospital alone, says Director Sergey Dubrov. The 3 seriously injured patients who ended up in intensive care are already feeling a bit better. All the diagnoses are similar: shrapnel wounds, cuts from glass, chest and torso contusions, and traumatic brain injuries. And here the main thing is to manage to help everyone all at the same time.
I want to thank my colleagues who, even though they were not on duty that night, the surgeons, the polytrauma department, the intensive care unit and other colleagues, they came to the hospital to provide assistance because the operations team received notifications about the number of casualties, and they came understanding that more hands were needed.
Viktor Ivanov, who was fortunate enough to remain unharmed, now knows the main safety rules during heavy shelling.
Tape on the windows doesn't help, curtains don't help, everything just gets blown out, that's all. Don't sleep near windows. If there's an alert, even if you don't have the ability or strength to go to a shelter, it's better to be somewhere with walls.
As a result of the latest shelling of the capital, more than 100 people have been injured. The vast majority of them are now in hospitals. All necessary medical care is being provided to them free of charge.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. On the Pokrovsk front, since the beginning of this day, Russian invaders have made 28 attempts to push Ukrainian defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Poltavka Mirna, Mirolyubivka, Koptevo, Luk, Lisivka, Novosergiivka, and Orekovo. The defense forces are holding back the enemy's onslaught. The fighting continues. Russian drones are reaching farther and farther from the front line in Donetsk region. Now, swarms of drones already pose a threat to cities that are 20 and sometimes even 30 kilometers from the front line. The Russians are indiscriminately striking both military and civilian targets. For example, in Kostiantynivka, which is almost 10 kilometers from the line of contact, the occupiers are making life for the locals seem utterly impossible. Despite all this, nearly 8,000 civilians still remain there, although more and more people want to get as far away from this war as possible. Evacuation missions are being organized by both volunteers and the police of Kostiantynivka. TSN special correspondent Yulia Kirienko joined one of these evacuation trips.
We need to save people and get them out.
A former district police officer from Kostiantynivka now evacuates civilians from cities seized by war. Yevhen and his partner Roman are heading out on another evacuation mission. Even though they're in an armored vehicle covered with metal mesh to protect against drones and equipped with electronic warfare systems, Yevhen still doesn't slow down, because that's the only way to at least try to outrun the drones that are constantly circling over the city in search of their next victim. The cars that have been hit just remain burned out on the road.
They hit everything they see, both civilian and military vehicles. That is, they don't understand.
We're driving onto one of the city's main roads. Outside the window of our armored vehicle, there's a kind of illusion of normal life. Until 3 p.m. before the curfew starts here, the roads are full of Car 7 minibuses are running. Some small shops are still open here and there.
We work and live one day at a time. It's scary, it's hard.
Kostiantynivka is actually very diverse. Despite the fact that the Russians are destroying everything, burning it down and constantly killing people here, you can still find some small pockets of life. For example, you can have a hot dog where the grill runs on a generator because there's no electricity in the city. Not far from the shop, there's black smoke, a fire from a recent strike.
Look, you can even see it, something is burning over there right now.
To the endless buzzing of a drone detector in the police car, we drive into a neighborhood that's closer to Chasiv Yar. Here it's even clearer that the front line is close. And here in the private sector, the police are already being awaited.
Good day.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Did you come for me?
Raisa is almost 80. She buried her husband 2 months ago and only after that decided to evacuate. And this morning her dog died, the one she wouldn't have been able to take with her, says her neighbor Volodymyr. He came to see the woman off. Raisa's whole life fit into 3 suitcases. The police and neighbors carry them into the car.
Of course I'm crying. Well, they're sending me away for good. And the house is here, it will stay.
Before leaving, Raisa gives them a piece of paper with the phone number of the evacuation mission, because Volodymyr and their neighbor Alla still can't bring themselves to leave Kostiantynivka.
I'm all alone. I have no one at all anywhere in Ukraine. I just can't bring myself to leave. 84 years old. If only they would just hit us right away, and that would be it.
Raisa has no idea where the police will take her, but staying at home, where the sound of explosions never stops, has become impossible for her.
I'm scared to be alone. That's all there is to it. I got used to being with my husband, always with my husband, the 2 of us together. I never made any decisions myself. He always made them himself. Then he had a stroke, and that was it. And in 8 days he was gone. And I myself, I was afraid to sleep alone at night.
In the neighboring town of Druzhkivka, volunteers are waiting for Raisa, transferring her belongings into a car and planning the route, because even on the rear roads of Donetsk region, danger is already lurking.
In 2 at most.
In 2 at most 1.5 months, everything has changed a lot. We would drive in just 3 to 5 kilometers, realizing that we could only be seen by chance. But now, even 20 to 25 kilometers in, it's already dangerous. And there's another danger. Now they send several drones at once. That is, one disables the car, the second strikes to injure people, and a third or fourth is still circling overhead.
The volunteers promise. First, Raisa will be taken to Pavlora to arrange payments for displaced persons, and then they will find her temporary shelter either in the Kiev region or in the Odessa region. She is one of only 5 people today who agreed to leave Kostiantynivka. Even though the front line is getting closer to this city, there are still 8,000 civilians remaining there.
And now we move to the Kramatorsk and Toretsk sectors of the front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. In the Kramatorsk sector, since the beginning of the day, there have been 2 clashes on near Chasiv Yar and another in the direction of Stupochki. In the Toretsk sector, the enemy tried to break through our defenses in the areas of Petrovka, Oleksandr Kaliniv, Rusiniv Yar, and towards Delivka, Bilahora, and Pretekain. the defense forces repelled 10 enemy assaults. Another 5 clashes are still ongoing. And now to another extremely important topic. The Russian army is running out of tanks. This is the conclusion reached by analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. Let me quote. According to estimates, only 46% of Russia's pre-war stock of tanks remains in storage, 42% of IFVs, and 48% of APCs. At the same time, images of 8 military depots apparently indicate that Russia has depleted most of its reserves where this very armored equipment was stored. According to experts' estimates, Russia will likely exhaust its remaining stocks of tanks and armored vehicles by the end of 2025. In other words, to put it simply, the situation for Putin is catastrophic. And in fact, by the end of this year, this type of military equipment may completely disappear from the arsenal of the aggressor's army. Our journalists know all the details.
Since the beginning of 2025 alone, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed 2 748 combat vehicles and 1 263 tanks belonging to the Russian occupiers. According to the American Institute for the Study of War, the Russian army has already used up more than half of its pre-war stock of tanks and armored vehicles.
A source on social media that tracks equipment at Russian military depots using satellite images reports that Russia still has 46% of its pre-war stock of tanks, 42% of its pre-war stock of infantry fighting vehicles IFVs, and 48% of its pre-war stock of armored personnel carriers APCs. Images of 8 Russian military depots apparently show that Russia has emptied most of its vehicle storage facilities. And the social media source estimates that Russia will likely exhaust its remaining stocks of tanks and armored vehicles by the end of 2025. Russia may have additional armored vehicles and tanks in covered storage that are not visible in satellite images.
The Russian Federation has significantly slowed the use of Soviet-era tanks on the front lines. Most likely, the reason is the limited numbers, as well as the occupiers' army switching to using motorcycles and all-terrain vehicles on the battlefield, since the gray zone is swarming with Ukrainian drones, for which tanks are easy prey.
Russian troops have been increasingly using unarmored civilian vehicles, mainly motorcycles and all-terrain vehicles, across the entire theater of operations in Ukraine since late autumn 2024. Russia's increased use of motorcycles is an adaptation in response to widespread Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian armored vehicles and the heavy losses of armored vehicles that Russian forces suffered in late 2023 and 2024. The losses of Russian armored vehicles are unsustainable and undermine Russia's ability to wage a prolonged, high-intensity war. But it remains unclear whether Russia's increased reliance on motorcycles and buggies will be sufficient to compensate for these losses in the medium and long term.
The Russian army has changed its tactics and strategy for using heavy equipment. In other words, the tactics of Russian forces in 2024-2025 differ from those used in 2022. Why are motor vehicles being used instead of heavy armored vehicles during offensives against the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces?
Russia's expenditures in 2025 exceeded 6% of GDP. As a result, defense industry enterprises are operating at full capacity, with existing production lines being expanded and new ones being opened. According to Western intelligence estimates, in 2021, Russia produced about 40 T-90M tanks. Now, around 300 of these tanks are being produced. All of these tanks remain in Russia and are not being sent to the front. The production of artillery pieces and ammunition will also increase by at least 20% this year. And the quality and production of drones has increased several times over. It is possible that Russia is preparing for war, not only with Ukraine, but also with Europe. That is why it is in the interest of the old world for Ukraine to destroy as much of the aggressor's military equipment as possible.
And now we move to the North Slobozhansky and Kursk directions of the front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill and maim. In the North Slobozhansky and Kursk directions, there have been 9 clashes since the beginning of the day. In addition, the enemy carried out 5 airstrikes, dropping 5 guided aerial bombs, and also conducted 40 shellings of our troops' positions and populated areas, including one from a multiple launch rocket system. Meanwhile, the secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergey Shoigu, has been making frequent trips to North Korea. Since the beginning of June, this is already his 2nd visit to Kim Jong-un. We will explain what this might be connected to what the two dictatorial regimes are negotiating about this time, and whether the reason for the Kremlin representatives' repeat visit could be issues with Iran that have affected arms supplies to Russia. Let's watch.
For the second time in a month, the former Russian defense minister and now secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergey Shoigu, arrived in Pyongyang, where he met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Sergey Shoigu arrived in Pyongyang on a special assignment from Russian President Vladimir Putin to hold talks with the North Korean leadership as part of implementing the agreements reached during the previous visit on June 4th. These agreements are being carried out within the framework of the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between Russia and North Korea. Press service of the Russian Security Council apparatus.
This is already Shoigu's third visit to North Korea in the past 3 months. After the invasion of Ukraine, Putin significantly strengthened his partnership with Pyongyang, refusing to comply with many of the sanctions he had previously voted for in the UN Security Council. The result of Shoigu's visit is that Pyongyang will send sappers and construction workers to participate in the restoration of the Kursk region. Chairman of State Affairs of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, has decided to send 1,000 sappers to Russia to clear mines on Russian territory, as well as 5,000 military builders to help restore destroyed infrastructure. Sergey Shoigu, Secretary of the Russian Security Council. The addition of human resources from North Korea itself is because Putin is paying for it. Basically, Kim is receiving not only funds, but also technology and experience in fighting a Western-style war. This aspect is more predictable. But that's only what has been officially announced. It is possible that in exchange for artillery shells from North Korea, Russia will share technology for producing modernized Shahed drones and also wants to manufacture them far from the Ukrainian border. North Korea supplies 60% of the shells. Everything that's currently firing on the Ukrainian fronts, I think that's the payment. Here you have Shahed drone technology. They calculated the cost, how much it would be, and North Korea will produce them. North Korea needs them too, to terrorize the South. Maybe they're being sent raw materials, they assemble them there and then send them back to Russia. And Russia pays them in cash. Recently, Ukraine has been striking the Shahed drone factory in Yelabuga more and more often. The most recent strike was carried out on June 15th. This was confirmed by the Ukrainian General Staff. In addition, the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Iran may also affect Shahed drone supplies. Iran needs its deadly birds more than ever right now. That's why Shoigu may have negotiated the production of upgraded Iranian UAVs in North Korea in exchange for technology. As for sending a North Korean military contingent to the war in Ukraine, like during the Kursk operation to push out the Ukrainian armed forces, Shoigu most likely did not negotiate this simply because North Korea no longer has enough soldiers with the necessary qualifications. Sending 100,000, the entire North Korean army is not as combat capable as those soldiers who went to Kursk. They were called the Elite Special Forces. This is just an ordinary peasant army. Their mandatory service lasts 8 years, it's almost slavery. Serfdom, they're all ready. So, talking about 100,000 and thinking they'll actually do something here, I think, first of all, they won't even be sent. Back in June of last year, Russia and North Korea signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. And now these two totalitarian regimes are sharing technologies and providing manpower support. Shoigu's latest visit is a vivid confirmation of this.
Now, let's take a detailed look at the situation on the Lyman and Siversk fronts. Let's be honest, this is yet another sacred objective for Putin and his entire gang. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. On the Lyman front, over the past day, the invading army carried out 18 attacks on the positions of Ukrainian soldiers near the settlements of Novy Mir, Hrushchenkove, Krekivka, Nadia, Ritkodub, Karpivka, and Zelena Dolina. 5 clashes are still ongoing. Ukrainian defenders repelled one enemy attack on the Siversk front near Ivano-Darivka. Yes, the occupiers are expanding the area of influence of their drones, not only to disrupt the logistics of Ukraine's defense forces at the front line, but also to continue terrorizing civilians. And the enemy's infantry outnumbers ours by a factor of 10. At the same time, the aggressors are trying to break through into the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, the defense forces refute Russian fake news about crossing the administrative border. TSN correspondent Yulia Kirienko spoke directly with soldiers on the front line. Her exclusive report is coming up next for your attention.
When you take out one enemy, your eyes light up and you just want to keep going more and more. And so it goes until you've taken down every last one. You work very quickly, efficiently, you enjoy it, you smile.
FPV drone pilot with the call sign Kozyan shares his feelings after an enemy assault. There's plenty of work for his crew because the pilots operate in one of the toughest sectors of the front, Novopavlovsk, which borders the administrative boundary of the Dnipropetrovsk region. In this section of the front, the Russians have brought in significant forces, the soldiers say. They launch massive assaults every day, and from different directions they can attack the same position of ours several times a day, trying to break through into the Dnipropetrovsk region. There are far more enemy soldiers than the army reports say. In the sector where the 72nd Brigade is stationed, there are 10 enemy infantrymen for every one of ours.
There are so many of them. I don't know how many FPVs it would take to wipe them all out.
The intensity of the fighting here is also evident from the number of enemy targets destroyed by our pilots.
Every day, dozens of infantry vehicles, some small warehouses, big ones.
And to hold their positions, our troops have to surpass the Russians in quality. The current realities of war are such that those who possess the largest number of FPVs and any kind of drones will be the ones to win in battle. Because right now the enemy also has far too many of these strike drones, and both our logistics and our infantry are suffering because of it. The Occupiers have partially redeployed their Rubicon drone unit from the Kursk region. According to the defense forces, this consists of 36 enemy pilot crews operating in the Pokrovsky and Novopavlivka directions. That's quite a lot, enough to at least try to take control of the rear roads and complicate the connection between our troops and the front line. And they also have plenty of drones for this purpose.
They use fiber optic spools that are 25 to 30 kilometers long. So a small 600-gram warhead is enough to burn up a passenger car, a Ural truck, or any kind of equipment just by landing somewhere near the road. And in the same way, these waiters, that's what they call them, are a very effective weapon for them.
At the moment we are less than 20 kilometers from the front line, so we constantly have to listen to the sounds around us and look up, because it's unclear whether the drone in the sky is ours or one of Rubicon's.
Maybe something is flying around somewhere, maybe they're training.
Ours.
I don't know. God willing, they're ours.
Pilot Vitaly seems to sneak his drone between green leaves and branches, trying to fly as precisely as possible into a homemade training obstacle. At first glance, it seems easy to fly through a small opening at different heights. But to achieve such a level of precision in flight, the fighter trained for almost a year. Ever since he signed the contract and became an FPV pilot in the Black Zaporizhians Brigade.
No matter how much a Russian soldier tries to dodge around a tree, no matter how much he runs, drones are more maneuverable than a Russian soldier. He can try to run away, but he won't escape from a drone.
And even though these pilots have destroyed thousands of targets, they don't skip these field trainings which look more like a dog training ground, because every time they hit the enemy, it means saving the life of one of our infantrymen. And it's precisely their FPV pilots who provide cover for them.
I've already flown so many missions, I don't even know how many. 1,000, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 sorties, tanks and all that. A lot of infantry too. So I really don't know how many. Sometimes during a shift, it's 15 Russians. And every day, at least 1 or 2 are killed. It's just like having breakfast or a morning coffee.
That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.